next is our session entitled Moving from Academic-Led Research Studies to Providing Digital Tools for Families. The session is sponsored by Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. This session will be moderated by Kamaldeep Singh Sembi, Director of Technology Licensing and IP Counsel of Simon Fraser University, an IP lawyer. Kamaldeep leads a team at Simon Fraser University to spark innovation and help guide researchers on paths to IP commercialization. I am really looking forward to this session, Kamaldeep. It's all yours.
All right, thank you. So as you mentioned, my name is Kamaldeep Sembi. I'm IP Counsel at SFU. Welcome to the Kids Brain Health Network virtual conference on this lovely Thursday. First, want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. It's quite a noble cause and an interesting session. I'm sure all the presenters and the attendees appreciate the support given by our sponsors. And just to kind of go over what this session is going to be about today, the session really deals with how we can use digital tools such as, whether they be apps, software, mobile platforms, to help children with neurological development disorder by just the collaboration between academia, the research in academia, paired with industry. And it's really the heart of the discussion today is going to be, how this partnership between academia and industry can facilitate and distribute and make effective those digital tools that are created. So with that, we're just going to move on to the next part of the session here, where I guess we'll have talk about two projects. The first project being Better Day, Better Nights, and the second project being Dino Island. And there'll be two videos shown for both of these projects today.
7 to 14% of children are affected by neurodevelopmental disorders and cognitive challenges in the areas of attention and executive function, including focusing, flexibility, remembering, self-regulating. Unfortunately, treatment for such cognitive challenges is costly and difficult to access, and there are very few such interventions that have proven effective. We have developed an innovative computerized intervention called Dino Island to address the significant gap in treatment options for children with neurodevelopmental disorders. Dino Island is being implemented across Canada through programs such as the Centre for Child Development in Surrey, Surrey School District, the Uncomplicated Family and Kids Uncomplicated in Alberta, and Woodview Autism and Mental Health Services in Ontario. Caregivers and support workers receive training on Dino Island through an innovative digital health platform called Telaroo, developed by our partners at the Uncomplicated Family and Kids Uncomplicated. And outcome assessments are being conducted to look at cognitive and behavioral outcomes. We're also assessing neural outcomes through a rapid neurophysiological measure of brain function called NeuroCatch, developed by our partners at Health Tech Connect Centre for Neurology Studies in Surrey. Our vision is to help children with neurodevelopmental disorders reach their potential through developing and deploying sustainable, effective, accessible, and affordable digital health interventions. Dino Island is a serious game, which is a game with a therapeutic as opposed to purely entertainment purpose, designed to improve attention and executive functions in children. It uses a hybrid approach that combines the appeal of tablet-based gaming with the effectiveness of an in-person interventionist child structure. It also has a self-adjusting design that enables the intervention to automatically stay at the appropriate difficulty level for each child. Dino Island was developed based on validated neuroscientific approaches and includes techniques that are known to improve brain function and to support transfer of these improvements into behaviors in the real world. It has a companion website that provides training that's tailored to non-professional interventionists and that instructs the interventionists how to support the child during gameplay.
The Centre for Child Development is the largest child development center in BC, serving over 3,000 children with special needs each year. To fulfill our mission of helping children with special needs reach their potential, it is essential that we engage in partnerships like Dino Island, which bring together academia, industry, and not-for-profit service providers. Through these partnerships, the center is able to bring cutting-edge research and innovation to our clients at an early phase of implementation. Partnerships like Dino Island also help to position the center as a leader in our sector by not only delivering best practices interventions, but also actively working to develop new innovations to support children with special needs and their families.
It's important for clinical work to be informed by science, so we work with scientists. And it's important for people to have access to interventions that are going to make a big difference for them, like Dino Island, especially in rural and remote areas. And our Teleroute technology allows for treatment delivery and fidelity. And this partnership is going to help a lot of kids.
My name is Dr. Ryan Darcy. I'm a neuroscientist and entrepreneur. You can't treat what you can't measure. So a key aspect of this partnership is to utilize NeuroCatch as an objective neurophysiological measure of brain changes that are related to the Dino Island intervention. NeuroCatch is sensitive to cognitive changes such as improved attention and executive function in children. This is a critical role, especially in our COVID times, because we can fine-tune the Dino Island interventions using sensitive NeuroCatch measurements. This sort of translational advance could only happen through partnerships between universities like University of Victoria, centers like the Centre for Child Development, and innovative technologies like Teleroute and NeuroCatch.
As a doctoral student in clinical neuropsychology at the University of Victoria and a KBHN trainee, my primary interest centers on collaborating with underserved and remote communities to develop effective and adaptive intervention tools and techniques that can serve the unique needs of a given individual, family, and community. Taking part in the development of the Dino Island Intervention Program helped to give me the opportunity to work with some of these communities and to broaden my perspective to more fully appreciate the many biological, psychological, and social factors that contribute to neurodiversity, as well as how an individual and family's specific strengths can be harnessed to help them reach their goals. However, in order to translate these valuable learning experiences into an intervention program that can make real-world change, it was essential to gain experience outside of academia. So this is where the industry partnership came into play. I learned essential lessons on how to turn theoretical concepts into practical applications, helping me to understand the many hurdles that need to be jumped and minute details that need to be considered in order to bring the abstract into something practical that can actually change lives.
We would like to extend a sincere thanks to all of our community, industry, and academic partners, including the families and children who are integral to the Dino Island program, and also to Kids Brain Health Network for the support and opportunity to continue to do this work. Dino Island, in association with our strategic partnerships, is poised to improve outcomes for hundreds of thousands of children with neurodevelopmental disorders, both nationally and internationally, in addition to children who are at risk, but who may not have clinical diagnoses. Ultimately, we believe that the development of healthcare innovations that are scientifically supported, but that actually make it out into the communities that need them, are critical. In addition to helping children and families, the Dino Island program is supporting the development of a highly trained workforce as we engage partners to translate this healthcare innovation out of the university and into Canadian companies and communities. We feel that we are on our way to accomplishing our vision of developing a sustainable digital health solution that provides equitable and affordable access to healthcare for all children and families.
Hi everyone, my name's Penny Corkum and I'm the lead researcher of the Better Nights, Better Days team. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the problem and the solution that we found, describe the Better Nights, Better Days program, what we did to evaluate the program, and our plan for sustainability. So we're focused on pediatric insomnia, which is difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking too early. It's a highly prevalent problem with over 70% of children with neurodevelopmental disorders experiencing insomnia. It also is very impactful for the child and for the family. There's good and bad news. The good news is that we actually know what works. The bad news is that it's not getting to families. So less than 15% of children with insomnia receive evidence-based intervention. This is a pretty classic science to practice gap, and what we're hoping to do is bridge this gap by using eHealth. eHealth is highly accessible, scalable. It has been found to be clinically effective and cost-effective in other areas. So we wanted to develop an intervention using eHealth, we wanted to evaluate it, and we want to plan to sustain it over time. We ended up developing the Better Nights, Better Days program for parents of typically developing children, and then we modified this for parents of children with neurodevelopmental disorders. The intervention is responsive design, meaning that you can access it on a computer, tablet, or smartphone. It's divided into 5 different sessions that map on to how we treat insomnia. There's a built-in coach who guides the parents through the intervention. The content is delivered mostly through animated videos with some expert videos. It's highly interactive, so parents can do things like build a sleep routine and download it, or build a reward program. There's a lot of choice, so they can pick strategies that work for their family. And there's tracking, so they can see the progress they're making in their child's sleep and whether they're meeting their goals. They also can see how they're doing with implementing the specific strategies that they've selected to use. They can download their session plan that's created through the program. They can download specific information to follow, and they also have access to roadblocks, which helps them problem solve any barriers they may be experiencing with implementing the study. We have completed the Better Nights, Better Days, the first version, the randomized control trial, and what we found were children that were assigned to the intervention group slept better, had improved daytime behavior and emotional symptoms. They had higher quality of life, and the parents reported a high level of satisfaction with the program and also said they were less tired. We are currently enrolling and conducting a randomized control trial for the NDD version. And we're also developing other eHealth interventions by modifying Better Nights, Better Days, but also by developing new programs on other platforms such as a smartphone app. And we have developed a program for teachers to use with students. So in conclusion, we think that eHealth and transdiagnostic interventions could meet the needs for accessible sleep care across Canada. We're now focusing in on sustainability. How do we get it from the research lab out to Canadian families? And we're doing this in collaboration with our industry partner, Velsoft, as well as through our industry liaison and innovation office at Dalhousie that really acts as a broker between academics and industry partners. We've been fortunate to be funded through Kids Brain Health Network to do an implementation study where we can actually evaluate this sort of novel approach to sustainability, which is commercialization. Many acknowledgements done very quickly. So the clinical scientists that helped develop the program and evaluate it, particularly want to acknowledge Dr. Shelley Weiss, who is the co-PI for the NDD Better Nights, Better Days program. My research lab of staff and trainees who've been actively involved, Velsoft's team, both the technology as well as the business parts of their team, and the ILI office at Dalhousie, as well as the many partners and stakeholders that have supported the research that we've conducted. And of course, the funding agencies, in particular Kids Brain Health Network and CIHR. Different ways you can reach out to us if you want to know more about Better Nights, Better Days. And I'm going to conclude by introducing the Better Nights, Better Days panelists. So in the top left is Mr. Jim Fitt. He's the founder and CEO of Velsoft. It is located in Nova Scotia, but the company sells to over 180 countries worldwide. Next is Dr. Elizabeth Keys. She's a PhD trained nurse, and she's completing her postdoctoral fellowship at Dalhousie University in the area of sleep. And at the bottom is me, and I am a professor and child psychologist. We really look forward to participating in the panel and answering your questions. Thank you very much.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed those videos. And right now, I'm going to introduce our panel here, which have worked on both of those videos. I'm going to introduce it by project. So let's start with the Better Nights, Better Days. So with this project, we have Penny Corkum, who's a neuroscience professor at Dalhousie University. Just to give a nice wave there. We also have Elizabeth Keys, who's a postdoc at Dalhousie University. We also have the industry partner, Jim Fitt, who's the CEO of Velsoft, which is a company that does customizable courseware. Now moving on to the second project, Dino Island. This was, as you remember, the video game for children with neurological disabilities. We have Sarah McCowan. She's a psychology prof at University of Victoria. We have John Sheenan, the grad student at University of Victoria. We have Robin Woods, who is from industry. She's the CEO of the Uncomplicated Family Corporation that provides digital health solutions. And we also have Ryan Darcy, who is the most interesting of both industry and academia. So he's an SFU prof, as well as the president and SEO of Health Tech Connects, which provides neurology support and research for commercial and I guess academia. So that's our panel, and we're going to jump into some questions now to talk further about these projects that are so interesting. So the first question I have is for both Penny and Sarah. Maybe Penny can answer this first. And this is to deal with, when and how did you start working together with, that academic industry collaboration, and specifically, who sought out who in this situation?
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here and to talk about this partnership. It's been a really exciting journey for me over the last, quite a long time now, probably about 7 years. And so historically, I developed interventions that were face-to-face interventions, and I moved into wanting to do this through technology so that we could reach more families. And I was working with a company, this is my first time doing this, working with a company, and it wasn't going so well. They just weren't able to meet the deliverables that I was expecting. And that's when Jim sort of jumped in and rescued us. And so we was really happy. So Jim, through his company Valsoft, he was looking at purchasing this company that I was working with, and through his own due diligence kind of noticed that there was like struggling partnership here. And so he asked if, we wanted to kind of discuss moving forward with his company Valsoft, and we signed a non-disclosure agreement in 2014. By that point, I had already moved to a company in the United States because we were in the middle of something, we needed to move on with it. But I always wanted to work with a Canadian company, partly because of, wanting to support Canadian companies, but also for our research, we do need our data on Canadian servers. And so there's a logistic reason as well. And so then Jim and I had the opportunity to co-apply for EHIP grant from CIHR to evaluate teacher help, which is another one of our e-health interventions for teachers working with kids with neurodevelopmental disorders. So that's when we first started collaborating in a substantial way, and that was 2015. And we continue now. We have Better Days back to Valsoft, and we're moving into the commercialization phase, and we're also running the randomized control trial for the NDD version through Valsoft. So I'd say Jim jumped in and rescued us, and the rest is history. So.
Perfect. Sarah, do you have, could you answer probably the same question on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us today. We're so excited to talk about the project and our partnership. Essentially how it came together for us. Well, Dino Island is really the latest iteration of a long line of neuroscientific intervention approaches that were pioneered really in the 1990s by Dr. Catherine Mateer, or Katie Mateer, and Kimberly Kearns out of the University of Victoria. And in fact, Dr. Ryan Darcy and myself were both honor students of Katie's and Kim's back in the dark ages, and have continued those relationships with them moving forward. So when we started developing Dino Island, Kim and Katie actually reconnected me with Ryan around the technology development aspect of Dino Island. And then that progressed into a more a research partnership around validating and scaling Dino Island. And we're really fortunate to be able to use Ryan's neuroimaging innovation, NeuroCatch, as part of our validation work. Then early on in the project, Ryan introduced Robin Woods of the Uncomplicated Family and me, as he felt that Robin's international leadership work in digital health innovations, in particular her work on leadership on an international project called the Panacea Gaming Project, in addition to her own digital innovation called Telaroo, would really nicely complement the work that we're doing. And we've been able to integrate Telaroo for doing training, fidelity monitoring in the project as well, which is wonderful. And then finally, around the same time, Dr. Brian Katz from the Center of Child Development was brought in as a partner, given the potential of this work that we're doing to help children and families that they serve, in addition to their wish to be involved in research that supports the development of new innovations. So I would say partnership was established at the stage of early research and development, and then has moved forward now into implementation and scaling and commercialization.
Cool. Nice to hear it was done at an early stage. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'm going to go back to Penny for this. Once you started working together with like that collaboration between industry and academia, what became apparent that, you could only get this done with this collaboration. It wouldn't be one side or the other, and it really utilized the strengths of both academia and industry, as opposed to being separate.
Yeah, good question. So, I think we just have different areas of expertise that have to be married together to work. Like, it's not like one can exist without the other. So, I was able to build, I'm the content expert. I know how to engage in the evaluation, how to bring parents and end users such as healthcare providers into that evaluation process and the design and development process. But I don't have the expertise to really move this out into the big world. So, first we had to develop just on our learning management system at Dalhousie University, and we can't really do much with that. Can't really move that beyond that kind of very confined area. So really through our work with Velsoft, we've been able to think about and meeting our vision, which is to get this out to all families. And I would never have that business and technology expertise. So really needed to rely on Jim and his company for that. And I think what's really unique about Velsoft, which really attracted me to work with Velsoft, is just their investment in this process. It's a very complicated, long-term process. And, working with an academic is not always easy. We evaluate everything with a very long-term randomized control trials. It takes a long time. So your industry partner has to be pretty, accommodating to our timelines and the requirements that we have to impose, the ethics, the large-scale evaluation. So Jim really was, willing to do that. And I think he has a really great vision that's bigger and more long-term. So I think partnering with industry is required, but partnering with a particular industry partner, there's something more to that about kind of a shared vision.
I hear you on the pacing. I've been in industry and academia, and the pacing in industry is very different from academia, I'll say. So on the Dino Island side of things, I'll throw it to Ryan, actually, and if you could answer the same question in terms of, once you started working together, what did you realize you could accomplish with this collaboration that you couldn't without it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. I think it's helpful to have some context around KBHN historically. Having the privilege of actually being involved in KBHN for quite a long time, I know that one of the priorities was translating this awesome innovations that were in our universities into innovations that are out helping people in the community through a forward business thinking situation. I think what everyone on this both projects represented on this panel are trailblazers in what was historically a bit of a frustration on how to get through to that place and to get into really demonstrating benefit to Canada through innovation. So it's really awesome to be on it for that reason. I think it's not accidental that we have Simon Fraser University, Dalhousie, and UVic, because these are universities that I think have been very forward-thinking in their innovation framework. And in our project in particular, it really did represent coming up against the challenges. This amazing stuff that Sarah was leading with Katie and Kim that could really help kids in terms of attention retraining, had massive, massive scientific capabilities, but really were challenged and coming up in earnest about how to translate this into a technology that could access our kids throughout our communities in not just Canada, but worldwide. And so what our collaboration, I think, brought to that was a really nimble group of people who could help guide that process. And so it's always been exciting because there's not a point where you can't look back and say, boy, if it weren't for us all collaborating together, this would not be happening. So certainly the idea of how to commercialize and that sort of thing has been led by both myself and Robin, giving advice on, okay, these are the things you need to think about in terms of IP. Let's talk about how we want to get this to market. Let's talk about some possible industry participants. In terms of running clinical trials, and that's always required for validating these new technologies coming in, without a doubt, through Brian and the Center for Child Development, we've been able to access clinical trials, not just in their center, but accessing the huge wealth of capabilities that sit here in Surrey. And along the way, I think through having the support of KBHN, which has been absolutely critical, we've really been able to see kind of a path that takes us to a place where we can realize that Dino Island is going to get out there and be a serious game helping. And I'll just end my comments with one component. I personally loved giving it to my own 14-year-old son. Like every boy, the last thing he wants to do is sit in class, right? And he loves Dino Island, and he's been using it, and it's been helping him. And that got me into conversations with his school to say, hey, can we get this to more kids? So I think it's through collaboration, when you partner and you have a common vision, that you can only have these sorts of things happen. It can't happen out of the university alone. It can't happen out of the business sector alone. You have to come together to make these things happen.
Great. And you were mentioning it in that conversation, there's the challenges that you face. Could you just speak more to that, which leads into my next question in terms of, given that there's that disparity or this distinction between industry and academia, what are the challenges you face when you have this collaboration that that were unforeseen, or that they were foreseen?
For sure. I often joke that compared to doing a PhD, and it's very similar to Penny's comments, I think taking a product to market is like at least 10 PhDs worth of challenges, right? So you're going to be facing challenges, and you have to be undaunted in that, and you have to be tenacious. In our project, and in particular, similar to Penny's example, early efforts really did partner with partners that I don't think the alignment was there, and it was very frustrating from a university academic point of view because it was not getting out in the world and it was not successful. So picking your business partnerships and being able to evaluate them quickly and make sure they're delivering is critical. And the reverse is also true. I think from any industry perspective, you have to pick your academic partnerships and have to be where your academic is really incented to publish papers, and business is incented to basically have a successful business, which means making revenue and profit. And so you need to have both really understanding how you can make each other successful. And in our project, we really had to reboot it actually twice towards that end. And we finally really did find and lock into a partnership where everyone got that mutual value proposition. And I think without that, you're not 10 times the PhD's worth of challenge. You could be hundreds or thousands or millions. And that's a shame when you think about it, because that's a lot of the ways that all our awesome innovations don't get out in the world to help people. So those are certainly critical challenges you will face.
Gotcha. All right. Staying with Dino Island, Sarah, do you have anything to add potentially, maybe or maybe not, in terms of the challenges faced?
Yeah, I would say actually we've had an incredibly collaborative and collegial relationship, and in the current partnership, I think our biggest challenge has been finding time in everyone's busy schedules to make sure that we regularly meet to keep the project really moving forward at the pace that we want to make it move forward at. I would say a foreseen challenge was the fact that didn't come to pass was the fact that our partners are coming from very different sectors with different priorities and potentially ultimate goals. Early on, we developed collaboratively a project charter, which really helped to clarify our common vision, which was to develop innovations that help children and families. And it also allowed us to have transparent discussions about what the different partner priorities and barriers might be and how we can achieve those mutual and individual goals and also mitigate some of those barriers. I would say the other shared challenge for all of us across all three sectors, both the charitable, academic, and industry sector, was that we were all doing this work in addition to our regular workloads. So that institutional support, particularly for the industry and charitable organizations, was really important as they've all made significant in-kind contributions.
That's great to hear. Switching over to the Better Nights, Better Days project, if I could throw it to Penny, if you could speak to some challenges that you faced that were foreseen or unforeseen with this collaboration.
Maybe I'll throw it over to Jim, maybe, because I think I already spoke about from my perspective. I think I shared the kind of history and the different timelines.
Sorry, right.
So maybe from the industry perspective, that'd be great to hear from Jim.
Sure, happy to jump in, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I have to say that I would consider it less challenge as I would just being different. Every project you're going to find challenges, but I think because we're patient by nature, and Penny's been patient with us. I think we've found a good place to work together and meeting some of these objectives. But it is different, and so, for example, I'm in business. I work towards generating revenue. I'm not necessarily embarrassed to say that, but I'm driven by money. I see Penny, Elizabeth. I see the work that they do, very driven by results and what gets me out of bed in the morning is looking at ways that I'm going to create growth and revenue for our company. And what I believe probably gets Penny and Elizabeth out of bed in the morning is what the research is going to uncover that day, or what they're going to discover that day. So it's a different mindset. Communications have to be different as well. In the early days, we had to learn certain terminology. We had to learn how things worked so that we could even have intelligent conversations. We know our side of it, but we need to understand the subject matter, at least enough to be able to interpret that subject matter and turn it into technologies. And communication is that side of it, but there's the business side of the communication as well. For example, we found early on that it's in my instinct to talk, when we talk about funding and costs of projects, that tax is, in my mind, excluded. But for everything a Penny does, tax has to be included. So, as much as a 15% difference sometimes when you're trying to budget projects, and we've found that to be a challenge early on, but we got over it. We were able to work it out, and which is a sign of a good relationship. I also think that in my world, I can go out and I can do business, but there's a procurement process that Penny's forced to live under. So we have to make sure that, and we respect that, and we think it's only fair, but it's a patient process, because there's a lot of steps that have to happen just to be able to work together in sometimes, at different times. And I think it's just a matter of on these projects being able to watch cash flow, be patient, make sure funding comes in at the right times, things like that. But overall, it's really just a case of it's different. It's not. I wouldn't really consider it a challenge.
Right, and just to echo your sentiments, I've heard in terms of what gets you up in the morning to motivate you to have this collaboration. I've spoken with PIs at the university, and they say that we need to do more than publish papers. And the best way for us to get our research out there is through industry, through collaboration, through commercialization, because it affords that mechanism of iteration to get it to a certain quality where people will consume it. And if that is the vehicle to get this research out there, then, so be it. That seems like the best way to go about, this type of mode, which is, I think, from a macro perspective, what we're here to talk about today in terms of, why we're here, why we're collaborating between academia and industry, and what advantages those give to, the public at large, which is really the end goal. And, what I want to, just to shift to my next question now, we're going to speak to that, like the actual goal in terms of, helping the families and what role the families play in the development of these products. And maybe I'll shift this, we'll stay with Better Days, Better Nights, and I'll kick it to Penny. If you could speak to that in terms of, do these collaborations support families, and what role do the families play?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be able to talk to this because I think it's just such a critical piece. And I spent a little time thinking about this, and the families, end users, families, as well as healthcare providers have really informed so much of what we're doing. So I'm a scientist practitioner, which means that in addition to being a scientist, I actually practice clinically as a psychologist, as a child psychologist. So I've ran a ADHD, neurodevelopmental disorder differential diagnostic clinic for 20 years. So I feel like I have my finger on the pulse a bit about what challenges families are experiencing, where the barriers are, what their needs are. And so I always take that into consideration. And also being a parent of a child with a neurodevelopmental disorder, that helps bring another level of insight that I can draw upon. But really, in the development and the evaluation stage, we do engage parents and healthcare providers into this process. So we conduct lots of different types of studies. So in addition to those ones we've talked about, like randomized control trials where we're evaluating the intervention, we also have a lot of studies leading up to this. So we conduct needs assessments. So asking parents, what is it that you need? Is what I'm thinking of developing really something you want? That's such a critical piece. We conduct feasibility studies. Is this something that you actually be able to use? Then we develop like a prototype or a beta version of the intervention, and we bring it back to the parent, back to the healthcare provider, and say, does it work for you? Can you navigate it? Are you finding the information you want? Is it accessible? Is it what you want to use? And then we take all that information to finalize the intervention. So really the parents are involved from step one, from the, when we think of the intervention through to really the evaluation. And then when we want to get it out to them in a more sustainable way, we also go back to them and say, well, what are the barriers and facilitators to this? And so we really, from step one to the end, families are involved. And like I said, healthcare providers, frontline healthcare providers that are going to be referring families to these interventions are also involved.
Great to hear. I'm going to get to the Dino Island side now, and maybe I'll kick it to John. If you could speak to, how families are integrated, how they help the project.
Well, can I just jump into, I think Sarah, as Vic has dropped her wireless, but I think it would be great as well to have Robin's perspective on this.
Sure.
Sure, John, do you want to go first, or are we?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay, so polite, us Canadians, right? Yeah, I think the parent perspective is critical. I'm actually also a mom of a child with a neurodevelopmental disorder, so my companies were built on my personal and professional passions to serve, and they continue to inform the builds. We really need to know who our end users are. We need to know if it's going to work for them, does it fit in their daily lives, because these innovations are really solving problems, so we need to be clear on what problems we're solving for the people that are going to use them. I think they're critical part of the process and informing, like you said, with prototypes, providing usability, feedback, so that they continue to be sort of co-collaborators to help us to get the best products and services to market.
Okay.
Yeah,
John,
just
anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think everything that Penny and Robin were both talking about is ringing true with Dino Island. One of the things that I've appreciated most, I was lucky to come in on this project early enough to where we were working on the previous iteration of it with Caribbean Quest. And between that and Dino Island and that whole process is, we've been working with communities up in, the northern Vancouver Island and, around more urban areas like Victoria and Vancouver. And one of the things that I've appreciated is how much we evolve and change and adapt to the feedback that we get from families from these different communities, because we recognize that we can't possibly anticipate all of the different challenges and needs that different families might have. And so it's really been a bit of a humbling experience in looking at if you're not open to having that kind of feedback and really eliciting honest feedback in terms of not just what works, but where are the shortcomings of the product, then you're not going to have as usable and effective of an intervention. And so that's one thing that I've really appreciated is how the family has played a real central role for Dino Island particularly.
Got it. Okay. Up till now, I think a lot of the questions have dealt with kind of the research and development stage, early stage collaboration and partnership. And I want to kind of shift the discussion more to kind of the later stage. So commercialization, let's say. And in this scenario, when you're taking it to market, what are the challenges, particularly in scaling these products to go to market? And maybe I'll start with Jim on this one for Better Days, Better Nights.
Sure. Well, I think that the whole concept of commercialization means that we're turning these into products that people will pay for. So early on, you have issues such as pricing and the model that they actually buy. So for example, do we price this in terms of here it is and what you pay for it, or do we establish sort of a subscription model? As we know, a lot of the technologies we're using are SaaS products, which means that it's online and it's ripe for a commission or a subscription type model. So one of the things we struggle with very early on is that type of the model that we bring it out. Then of course scaling it means making sure we're getting to the right people. So marketing is key, obviously, and part of marketing is identifying who is going to be the users of this and being able to A, get in front of the right people, B, make sure the messaging is there that lets them know that this is specific for them, and then also communicating what the outcomes of this are going to be. So I believe that the work that we've done, which I'm very proud of and very honored to being able to work with Penny and Elizabeth and Dal. So we're very proud of this. We get excited when people are using it. So we want to get it out. We want to make sure people realize the value of it, and scaling it just means getting more eyeballs.
Got it. Okay. Robin, can you speak to this from the Dino Island perspective?
Sure. Definitely pricing. I would agree with you that certainly when you're leading and you've got an innovative model or innovation, it can be challenging to find comparables to really figure out what is the right price, especially when you're really trying to prove that value proposition at the beginning. You want to really get it out there so people are using it so you can get that feedback. I think there are lots of challenges like determining product market fit. So for example, the markets are complex, they're vast, they're very dynamic right now, certainly in this COVID context. So some markets are rapidly expanding, some are contracting. So you really need an informed sort of go-to-market strategy. I think also it's important to ask yourself, is the growth strategy aligned with the overall vision? So what are some of those quick wins that you can get early on versus the long-term planning and growth? I think, do you have a workable, scalable business model, as Jim referred to, and then the capital and the infrastructure to scale? And then also, who are the team members that are needed for scaling, hence the reason for the collaboration. So there are lots of challenges, but it's certainly some of those challenges are barriers to entry for others. So working together, we can achieve the goals aligned with the vision.
Yeah, I think what I would add to this just as a quip is, this is really where the industry collaboration really helps. I mean, that's what they do. They take things to market. They know how to scale. You're really taking advantage of that skill set for that part of the business, let's say, or the partnership. To move on to the next question, I'm going to talk about kind of the roles that trainees play in the development of the commercialization of this role. And I'm going to throw it to Elizabeth first, who's from the Better Days, Better Nights project, if you could speak to that. I think you may be on mute, Elizabeth. I think you're still on mute. Can't hear you yet. No? Okay, well, you know what? I'll give you some time to sort that out. I'm going to throw it to John first, and maybe he can speak to the trainee aspect for commercialization.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the unique things that myself and the other graduate students in Dr. McGowan's lab have had a lot of particularly for individuals studying clinical psychology and neuropsychology, we've been able to be involved in, not just the research component, but then a lot of us didn't come into grad school looking for, business or commercialization experience, but we kind of had our bubble burst whenever it came to, okay, so here's this, product that we want to be able to bring to families and individuals. How do we do that within just the capacities of academia? And so it's been really a unique and helpful experience on the training side of things to be able to learn about, okay, if we're going to be working with, individuals like Ryan and Robin and learning about, okay, you want this to be sustainable. How are we going to do that? We've really been able to work with them in considering, like I said, some of those practical details that we don't necessarily think of when we're looking at it from just like a clinical trial perspective or a development perspective. So that's been really helpful. And fortunately, Dr. McCowan's allowed us to be part of these meetings all the way along. From the programming and design of Dino Island all the way through to these larger kind of broader conversations around how to bring it to families and individuals.
Right. And John, you're speaking to your personal experience in terms of collaborating, and you didn't go to grad school for business, but you get that exposure, and that's on a micro scale. But think of that on a macro scale nationally. If this becomes these type of synergies and these type of partnerships and the marriage of those skill sets, it bodes so well for an innovative culture and an innovative regime, in Canada. So I think just more of that can only do good. So I don't know if Elizabeth, are you back with your audio? Are you good now? Not likely. Okay, charades? No? Okay. That's fine.
I think for the HQP, for the highly qualified personnel in KBHN, this is a really important point. And perhaps just to reinforce what John is saying, we definitely see lots of increase in people graduating from graduate school and considering careers outside of traditional academia. And I think one of the things this project represents is I have lots of trainees come to me now, and it's not just graduate school. You certainly get it at the undergrad level, but I think that where the shift is particularly the master's and PhD level, these projects are helping them to think about the concept of, okay, well, actually, I might have an entire world of options from the innovation sector that I haven't considered. And I think that's a very, very important point to highlight, is that does open up our ability to not just provide those careers, but from a Canadian innovation sector, that will move us up the ranks, right? As our super smart people that are being trained in the universities start to really connect into business and innovation and create these successful companies, it will give us the mission that in the university, our jobs are not just to publish, but really to translate that into innovations that are making a difference in everyday life.
Yeah, and that comment really leads me to my next question, which is open to the floor. And Ryan, you're maybe the best person to talk about this, given your kind of dual role in industry and academia. But what is the future of collaboration between academia and industry? And this is open to anybody. How do you, given you've had exposure through Dino Island and Better Days, Better Nights, you've kind of seen how this works from a personal perspective. What do you see in the future in terms of Will there be more? What could be done better? Maybe there are tools that are coming up now that'll make it easier. I'll just leave it open for anyone to jump in. Nobody?
I think it's unlimited potential. I think that the entrepreneurial spirit helps to keep driving innovation and moving us forward. And so I think, and science. So I think there is unlimited potential. There's more strategic initiatives to support, R&D with the goal of job creation. So National Research Council of Canada, the IRAP programs, there's many across the world, really, creating these sandboxes of innovation that can then be measured and then quickly sort of brought out to the public so that they can get these great outcomes. So I think it's unlimited potential, and I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, and from a university perspective, it's so interesting because you have bleeding edge research being done there, and you have the smartest of the smartest researching their respective fields, and a lot of times all that happens with it is that it just becomes a paper, and a lot of people think that's not the most effective way to get that solution out into the world, and therefore you have these types of collaborations, you have these partnerships with industry to say, okay, look, this solution will help more people if we make a video game, if we make this something that can scale, that can help families, that can help kids. And, if it was just a paper, yes, that science is out there and yes, people can learn about it, but really the pragmatic and tangible implementation isn't there until you have, almost this tangible product that people can use, this therapy that is out there. And, right now, it seems like that partnership between industry and academia is a great bridge. And as I think Jim was mentioning earlier, a lot of these models are SaaS models, which makes it very easy to distribute, very easy to scale, because everybody's got a smartphone these days. Everybody has a computer, generally speaking, at least in Canada. So it's very simple to if that's a medium for this research, for this collaboration to go forth, that's one way to go about it. So I think technology may play a role in the future in terms of how the distribution of this collaboration goes forth. And maybe that's just a note I'll add.
Yeah, if I can chime in, I think concretely, it's really interesting. First of all, the way that I've started to really understand it in my own experiences is that you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into creating a publication, and it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's tough. Peer review is tough. What I think all of us want is to see that information ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, impact the world, and that's where you can start to incorporate the idea that your paper can not just land on your CV or increase your citation count or what have you, but it can also actually drive and create product and services. And so the intellectual challenge becomes, how do you do that? And I think that when you start to tackle that intellectual challenge, you really can basically boil it down into three possible options. The first is, from an academic perspective, you can take the plunge and go take an industry job and work to use that science to help push forward the product and service. The second is to use Penny and Sarah's examples. You can be academically very industry savvy faculty that can leverage your faculty position towards that ends, and then find awesome partnerships with people like Jim that really help to translate that in. And the third is you can become a confused academic like myself and do a little bit of both, and really try to then have the humility to know you need to learn how to be an entrepreneur, and take the same approach you did when you got your PhD and really develop yourself so that you can speak two languages, which is not impossible. I can't, but others in Canada can. And I think that those are the three main options that face not just those of us in the careers now, but those who are coming through graduate school.
Gotcha. Okay, just going to go through and see if anybody has anything else to add. Elizabeth, potentially?
Yeah, hi, sorry about that. I just think, like, from a trainee perspective, moving forward in my career, one of the interesting things I've learned about is, you know, before with some of the interventions that we're commercializing, we're kind of retrofitting them to be commercialized. So moving forward, I see myself, because I am the same as Penny, I'm a registered nurse, so I have that healthcare practitioner focus, trying to think of that a little bit more preemptively and understanding how important the relationships are with your industry partner in how to how much time it takes to build that. It's kind of not one project. It's going to be done in one project. It's really a building of multiple projects over time with a relationship, and finding a good key partner is going to be really part of the foundation to move on for me.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to move on. Actually, just before I move on to the next part of the session here, just want to note that Chris will actually be giving a presentation to close us out in about 15 minutes from now, which will take 20 minutes for that presentation to last. But in the next 15 minutes, I just want to take some Q&A from the audience, actually. And I'm just going to survey some questions here and see what we have upvoted and throw this to the crowd here. So, you know, one of the questions is, how can we spread and scale innovations in Canada? You know, the analogy given is they think about the Abilities Expo in the US and how it accesses community. If any of you are familiar with that expo, is there anything similar in Canada, or maybe just more generally, you know, how could we spread and scale innovations to specifically the community in Canada? So it's for like either Jim or Ryan or whoever.
I'll take a stab at answering it from my perspective. I mean, I think it goes back to this, partnership with industry and people like me, scientists and clinicians, because I think we both work in different ways, but through that we can reach the most people. So I have the connections with healthcare providers, with associations and different disciplines across Canada that I can kind of help to with sustainability, with getting it out there. But Jim really has the knowledge about marketing and getting it in front of those people. But I think it really needs to be both approaches. So a more traditional approach like what we've done in the past to sustain our interventions, plus this really novel, exciting new way that we're bringing into behavioral health science, which is through marketing, through leveraging all that knowledge that we just haven't used in the past. So I'm really excited. Kids Brain Health Network has funded a study where we're actually going to compare a more traditional approach to implementation versus a more novel marketing approach to implementation. Not that one would be better than the other, but how do they reach different people? And I think this will be really exciting to see the results of this, because I don't think we know. I think this is a really new way of thinking.
Right. That'd be great, because that's exactly it. Just how do you target to reach different segments of the community, and that's like what the question was getting at. And just by the way, that question was from Rachel Martin, so I just want to reference that. We kind of touched on this earlier, but Jesse Lewis is asking a question. Have there been any unexpected barriers or benefits to the industry partnership that either Dino Island or Better Days, Better Nights has seen?
I'll jump in by just sharing that one of the things that I noticed was that once we completed the project, it opened the doors to many different variations of the product. So so the opportunity was able to, like, once we finished it, it just created this culture that kind of organically, that we thought, well, if we did this, we can do this as well. And so one product actually became several products.
Gotcha. Okay. This next question is for Dino Island specifically. I guess it was mentioned that a support adult should be trained for the best, I guess, implementation of this. But in, let's say, environments where they're more isolated, the children are more isolated, is there a way to have this implementation such that it may not necessitate having a trained adult to supervise?
Yeah, I can comment on that. At this point, sort of Dino Island it's actually been designed and developed to be accessible, with one of our key goals being access in remote communities. So we developed it with this in mind. It is a hybrid model, which we feel is the most effective model for, or the science shows us is effective for supporting generalization and maximizing effects, which means that there does need to be an adult in the child's circle of care present. It could be a support worker, a parent, and we have a comprehensive training program that is also delivered online and in a web-based manner to provide that training. This is also being facilitated by the use of Telaroo, which is a very sophisticated online conferencing tool, which allows us to directly reach out to families and to provide them with additional coaching and support, and to do some additional fidelity monitoring as they're progressing with the intervention. So yes, we do believe that this is an intervention that can absolutely be delivered more remotely, not requiring someone with professional expertise in this area to be there all the time.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And it's also great to hear that, again, because of the technology, it can scale to places that, people are more remote, because all they would need is, an internet connection, let's say.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the big challenges of this type of intervention in the past is that they've been unaffordable, inaccessible for those people who need them the most. So again, our program was very much developed with access and feasibility in mind.
Gotcha. Okay. And this is a question for either team. And it may not be applicable, but how have you guys engaged with government or potentially partnered with government? Has that process been smooth or slow, or how's it gone?
Like, are you speaking to perhaps regulations, the regulatory context, or?
Potentially, but also just from maybe a partnership perspective as well, in terms of if they're providing resources, or they're providing feedback, or they're championing the project, or providing something for the project beyond. But if the only, I guess, interface has been regulatory, you could speak to that as well.
Well, it just came to mind as you were speaking that the way that we actually interface with government during the R&D phase is often in terms of raising capital for, through grants. So for us on a previous project, National Research Council of Canada was involved. And so there is a lot of dialogue to get that project plan across the finish line. And then there's regular claims that need to be done, but they do have advisors that continue to support the R&D pieces. And in terms of the regulatory piece, I think there is this tension about how like poorly designed regulatory processes can actually do harm in terms of, stifling innovation, growth, job creation. So there's lots of tension there, but of course we want to protect the public. So it is a balance. So my question would be, can the government regulate software in an agile way so that they could get out to the people that need them and into the hands of the people? And so for me, in my opinion, I would love to see government regulate and measure outcomes versus activities, but I'm actually not sure how popular that opinion is. But
well, I'm going to jump on that because I think that's a great question. Because just philosophically, is there that need for regulation for these tools developed online, especially if these tools are designed for helping kids with NDD and things of that nature? And if so, how stringent is that? Like, you're coming up with solutions that are supposed to be agile, quick, supposed to be distributed, and the second you put regulation in there, it inhibits this being given to the public, given to the people that need it, and it needs to pass through hoops. So like you're saying, there is that tension between the government in terms of, should they be regulating? And if so, what are they regulating? Are they regulating the content? Are they regulating the distribution? Are they regulating whether it's substantively helpful? Is like maybe a question for anybody here. Is there a current approval process for regulation? I'm not too sure.
Sorry, I have Health Canada approved brain technologies in market, so I'm happy to tell you that if you face a decision where you really have to decide, are you creating a regulatory based medical technology or a consumer health space app? Now, the important thing to realize is that is not a static situation. So these are changing greatly. One prominent example would be something like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit watch, which now monitors a number of your cardiac and other pulse ox and that sort of thing. So we are moving in the digital health space towards kind of an evolved scenario. But currently, right now, if you're creating a product or service, you have to contemplate whether or not your product or service is a medically regulated product or service or a consumer health. And those are very different markets. In general, you still are probably at the advantage of going through the regulatory process, because when you want to introduce something in terms of an evaluation, a diagnostic, or a therapeutic, no one will touch it if you don't have proper regulatory approvals. And that basically sanctions it in terms of curated clinical trials and repeatability and validity and that sort of thing. That process is very big process. And I think it does do, in some ways, it helps to filter out a lot of what we see, so we know if something is legit or not, because it's made it through that process. The other thing I would say, and which is unrelated, but I want to pick up on both Cam, what you said, and Robin, what you said. For the researchers out there, there are huge benefits to working into this space. Primarily, as Robin highlighted, there's grant funds through the IRAPs, but I think it's really important to note that in Dino Island, one of the huge assets in Canadian academic space is MyTax. And certainly one of the opportunities that came through for us was to be able to leverage MyTax funding and work with people like Lawrence Meadows to be able to do so. And that is absolutely critical for those of us who are writing grants because it gives us additional revenues to fund this sort of research.
So interesting. So now with, let's say, Dino Island, would that be subject to regulation? And if so, what type of regulation?
Every technology or product or service, actually, because services also can be subject to these things, you have to ask that question. So if Dino Island becomes a serious game that is not medically regulated, it would be in the consumer health space, and then you would take a path. So you basically will choose your path. And so a big commercialization decision that is underway for Dino Island is it going into the consumer health space, or is it going into the regulated Health Canada FDA space? And that of course, is a decision that any technology would have to make at this point.
Gotcha. Okay.
And certainly, like the privacy and security on the data, like people really need to be informed about the current regulatory climate. And then I think the key is being really careful about your warrants and claims. And then as the science and the data informs, then we continue to update those warrants and claims for the protection of the public and to make sure, to be free of litigation as well. I mean, there are lawsuits in the US where people have said things, this will change your brain, and really no regulation, no science, and they've been sued. So it's very important to mitigate risk by looking at those regulatory pieces. Yeah.
Have you, and just pick up on the privacy aspect you mentioned, have you gotten feedback from families or people that are concerned of, this is my child's personal medical information and we'll be, basically creating this information? Who holds that information? Is that our information? And is that a concern that you hear?
Sarah, do you want to address that? I feel like.
Well, we haven't. I mean, haven't expanded Dino Island beyond the research mandate. So currently, it's not been an issue because the information is highly confidential and private. We're not actually collecting a lot of, I would say, personalized data at this point. So, you know, but in the future, if we're, you know, designing an intervention that provides more specific information back to the family individually, then that is something that will, you know, it's something that we take very seriously. It's not something that we've necessarily heard that is a concern from families at this point.
And just a really quick question for both of you, like less than 30 seconds. Where can people access, number one, Dino Island, and number two, Better Days, Better Nights?
Yeah, well, so with respect to Dino Island, we're continuing to implement and scale. We have projects that are going on at this point in time, and probably the best way to connect with us is at our lab email, which is mccowanlab@uvic.ca.
Got you. All right. Can people find that on the website, or is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds good. And Better Days, Better Nights?
Excellent. Yeah, so for Better Days, Better Nights, probably our website, which is just bnbd.ca, and it'll direct you to wherever you need to go. But we were recently funded through CIHR to scale out for, in the context of COVID, which is really exciting and interesting to see if helping families sleep better, not only the children, but the families, you know, can help build some resiliency in the face of all the stress and challenges that we're facing right now. And so this is going to be available in the new year to families across Canada to access Better Nights, Better Days to help them during this stressful time. And Elizabeth was very involved in writing this grant and getting this up and running. And right now we're working with Jim and Velsoft to do some final modifications so that it'll be ready to launch within the kind of context of COVID. So, but after that, then we are going to be moving into the commercialization phase, and again, going through my website would be the best way to find out where we're at and how to access it. If you have a child with a neurodevelopmental disorder, we are running a randomized control trial. We need 20 more families to participate, so we'd love to see you come and join that. And to access that one, you can still go to the BNBD site, or else you can put an NDD in front of it with a period. It'll take you directly to that one. All right, great plug. I want to thank everybody on the panel today, from Penny, Elizabeth, Jim, Sarah, John, Robin, and Brian. This has been a great talk, I feel, and also the audience for providing the questions. We'll be closing this part of the session now, but we're going to go over to Chris for his closing remarks for this session.
Thanks, Cameldeep, and what a great session. It was great to listen in, and a great scene setter to what I want to talk about, so thank you very much. So hopefully my slides will come up. Excellent, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk to you about an issue that I think flows very nicely from what the panel was talking about, which is as their technologies are moving more firmly into commercialization, how are we going to make sure that there's an equality of access to these technologies across Canada, somewhat differently from the US, because we have a comprehensive publicly funded healthcare system. The main vehicle for rapid dissemination is going to be public healthcare system funding, and increasingly that's used. Those decisions are made using a suite of tools called health technology evaluation. And today I want to talk to you about that, what it is, the what, the how, the why, the who of all of that. So without any further ado, let's get on with this. So yes, I'm going to talk to you about the what, why, who and how of health technology assessment, and then talk about the really important focus of HTA, as we call it, which is about proving value, because that's what the evidence base that you're going to need to persuade healthcare systems to pay for these technologies so that all families can access them. Okay, so historically, there's been this tension for technology adoption where developers, such as the people on the panel we just listened to, they develop a technology and they try to persuade health systems that they should pay for it. Right? They try to what we call this market push approach, and health systems have been, to be honest, quite resistant to the adoption of these technologies. It's not easy to push a technology into a health system, and sometimes I characterize it as, the manufacturers, the developers, the innovators will say, I've got a solution. Can you tell me what your problem is? And the payers are saying, well, I've got these problems. Do you have a solution? And they talk across purposes quite often. There's a lack of joined up. So this push me, pull you from Dr. Doolittle is a really good sort of metaphor for how technology adoption has worked historically. And what we really want is a pull model. And in the pull model, the health system on the right is very clear that saying, I've got a problem, and they're asking developers, innovators to provide them with a solution. So in the time of COVID, one of the big things we're all worrying about again as the second wave gets so large, is health systems being overwhelmed. Can they provide regular care as well as managing COVID, or will COVID's demand on hospital beds and critical care unit capacity actually push normal care out of the hospital? And what we're hoping is that the expansion of effective, safe, high-quality remote care will allow us to have a much lower demand on hospital facilities, so that the COVID surge won't overwhelm it. That is an example of the health system trying to pull technologies in, pull remote monitoring, remote healthcare delivery, remote therapy delivery technologies in to the system, because it addresses a problem that they can see coming. The problem being that COVID may overwhelm the ability of the healthcare system to deliver the care that's needed to people in the usual way. So, health technology assessment. What is it? Well, here's the definition from the International Association of Health Technology Assessment Agencies, an organization called INATA. Quite wordy, but there's some key words or concepts really that I want to highlight to you. I've highlighted them in red. HTA is a multidisciplinary process that uses explicit methods to determine the value of a health technology. So this is all about value. What does the technology do that we value? Okay, we'll come back to what value means and how we measure it towards the end of the talk. And we're interested in that over the life cycle of the technology. So quite often, when a technology is launched into the market, we're not so certain. We have more uncertainty about both the magnitude of its value and the sources of value that it produces. So we want to be tolerant to adopt innovation in a way that gives it a chance to prove out its value. So we take a life cycle approach in evaluating a technology. We don't say, what do we know it does now with certainty? We're early in the technology adoption. We're quite tolerant of uncertainty to allow technologies to prove themselves out. And it's not that rare that actually where the value really comes from and where we thought it was going to come from. The purpose is to inform decision making. It's not to make decisions, but it's to provide the evidence to decision makers, usually based in government departments and ministries of health, provinces across the country in Canada. So the decision makers always have the option of saying, well, this is what the evidence says, but for other considerations, we are going to choose to fund a technology which the evidence might not conventionally support funding. Or sometimes to say, well, we know the evidence indicates that we probably would normally fund it, but they have the right to say, because of this factor or that factor, we're not going to fund it. So HTA doesn't make the decision. It's a way of giving evidence in this structured way to decision makers. And in having this structured and consistent approach to evidence, what we're hoping to promote, and I think in practice we do promote, is more equitable, efficient, and a high quality health system. So we help decision makers to adopt technologies that are effective, that work, that do what it says on the tin, so to speak, and to address inequities, because we know one of the big problems in our health system is equity. You know, there isn't equality of access, there isn't equality of outcomes, there isn't equality even of resourcing. HTA processes, we can identify the evidence for these things and how new technology, and I think a lot of these technologies that you've been hearing about in the previous session from the panel, are really capable of improving equity in access to healthcare. For, let's be honest, a neglected segment of the population with high unmet needs. So this process of HTA, the way we do it, enables that case to be made clearly to decision makers, as well as the more technical, does it work kind of things. And in making or promoting more efficient use of our limited healthcare budget and more equitable access, we help to end up with a more efficient and high quality healthcare system. So thinking about who, well, who happens in Canada, it happens pan-Canadian level and at the province territorial level. So the pan-Canadian national HTA organisation is called CADTH, Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Healthcare, and they have a number of programs. The program into which most of that we've been hearing about today would probably be evaluated is called their Health Technology Assessment Service. So it takes a different approach to considering evidence. It takes a different lens to considering value. But it is a program of work with standardized processes, which will be particularly relevant to these technologies. And I would encourage the innovators, the entrepreneurs, to make sure that they understand what this process, this service does, how it works, and how it can help their development plans for their technologies, and thereby aid the probability that they can get funding from healthcare payers once they get to properly to market. In Quebec, we have an analogous organisation called INYES, much bigger because it considers social services, social care, which I think is very pertinent to this population as well. And it has over 20 programs, and it's been talking about and the interventions of value, potential value to your communities, probably fall in one of 4 programs, and that's a good thing. I mean, the panel was talking earlier about choosing your translational pathway, your regulatory pathway. Well, there's also options to choose your evaluation pathway, and so in Quebec, having the option of the Technology and Innovation and Medical Devices program, or the Youth and Families program, mental health and the trauma program, having that choice and looking at where your technology has the strongest case for the remit of the program gives you a better chance of finding a way to a positive recommendation out of an organisation such as INYES. These are the 2 biggest organisations, but there are actually a lot of HTA organisations across the country, as you can see on this map. Most provinces, but not all, have their own HTA organisation. I head up an organisation called the which does HTA work, the majority of the HTA work for the province of Alberta, for example. But most provinces have their own HTA organisation that does this sort of evaluation, providing reports that go into government to inform their funding decisions. So how do we do it? There's lots of us, it looks like a busy little industry, lots of organisations, basically SMEs doing this across the country for different governments. So what is it we actually do? So I've tried to summarize it in 10 questions that we try and answer. You can do a year-long graduate program on what health technology assessment is and how you do it. But just to get over the key concepts to you, the first question we want to nail down in assessing a technology is what problem does this technology seek to address? What is the unmet need? And so, because if you can't define that clearly, you can't define what the scope for value is. And it's amazing how often when I meet with developers of technologies who are still in the kind of the early commercialization phase, that they haven't nailed that down clearly. But until you can identify very explicitly what the problem your technology is seeking to address, the health system can't say, well, what would be the benefits of solving that problem? If we took that problem away completely, what would it save the health system in money? What improvement in quality of life and life expectancy, etc., would be provided to the recipients of the technology? So that's the first question, and the tighter you can nail that, the better. Then we get into processes or requests for evidence that are quite akin to what you may be familiar with when Health Canada, the regulators, look at things. So we want to know, is it safe? Can it do harm? If the information it provides is not always correct for the individual, what would be the implications for that individual? If it was a diagnostic of some form, this idea of false positives and false negatives driving decisions, what harms to the individual or their families could flow from that? It's really important to know that you're confident that there is as small as possible chance that this technology could actually harm people. So it's got to be safe. And then, is it efficacious? So we differentiate between an idea of efficacy, which is how good is this under ideal circumstances? Because we know that the reality is none of us live in ideal circumstances. If it's not good under ideal circumstances, then the chances of it being good value under real life circumstances is correspondingly lower. So only once we've got some confidence that it's looking it looks like it works under the ideal circumstances, do we then start saying, yeah, but what about how effective it is in reality? So that's our third question. Is it effective? Only once we've got that kind of case for what's the benefit, in essence, how effective is it, given that it's safe, do we start to ask questions about costs. And the reason we ask questions about costs to inform decision makers at the healthcare system level is that cost, it's money, but actually it only matters because it's actually somebody else's healthcare. If the money is spent on your technology, on your family, it can't be spent on somebody else. So actually, when we move money around the health system, we're actually reallocating health between different members of society, all of whom in principle have an equal call on that limited resource that we have in the healthcare system budget. So that's why we worry about cost. So we ask ourselves, what's the direct cost of this technology? The price that we're asked to pay for it, the cost of the services that it directly triggers. Those are, we want to know that, but also we want to know it has indirect effects on costs. So we know there's spillover effects within a family. If we have a child with a chronic illness of any sort, we know that has impact on the household's use, the household's out-of-pocket costs, the household's time away from healthcare. So we want to take in those indirect costs as well. And then we want to say, well, okay, so we know what it does, we know what it costs. When we put those two things together, how much do we value its net effect? Are we willing to pay that? And basically we're asking the question, we answer that question by saying, well, if we spent the same amount of money on the least valuable thing we currently do, would it produce more or less health? Because if we're going to have to give something up to pay for this, we should give up the least good thing we currently do. And that's how we answer that question. Hopefully, it's more effective. So, and then we ask, are there ethical or equity? And I talked about equity issues earlier that would say we should be willing to pay more. And then we say, how confident are we? Because if we're very uncertain, there's this risk of making the wrong decision. And sometimes we'll say, no, I need more evidence. And that's part of the game. And then we need to ask what the views of those affected. So we need to hear from the families and patients affected. And then we look at all of those answers to questions 1 through 9 and say, on balance, do the benefits outweigh the costs of this technology? Proving value, and I'm running out of time, I'm sad to say, but proving value is a long list of things. It's life expectancy, it's quality of life, it's savings to the health system, it's meeting an unmet need. But there's a long list that you want to address, and I've talked about a lot of them in passing as we go. But it's a very inclusive definition of value. And so when you're designing your research to prove out the value, to persuade your healthcare system to pay for this, you need to be inclusive, not exclusive. And I think that's the end. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Chris, for that presentation. Very interesting. Specifically on, one of the points you made was this, using technology, you can improve the equity to healthcare for people in terms of, this is one way to level, let's say, the playing field beyond just logistical or procedural benefits. You can use technology as a means to do so. And, with that going forward, do you see, especially given the current climate with COVID, where, in a lot of industries, they see technology as almost accelerating, given the work from home data. The fact we're having this conference right now over a video conference and things like this have provided technology for a means to allow for more to get done that maybe wasn't traditionally the mold. In healthcare, do you see this? Do you see that acceleration within the healthcare space, within the health tech space?
I think we will see that, not just the acceleration to do more with the same, but I think to do different with the same, to address both. We're freeing up with technology and its adoption sort of capacity within the healthcare budget, and we can choose whether we just use that to be even more efficient, so to do lots more of essentially the same thing, but in a slightly different way, or whether we choose to take some of those savings and allocate them to do different things. And I think certainly for the Kids Brain Health Network community, we want to add things to the portfolio to meet the needs of this, I think, honestly underserved population. And so taking some of the savings that technology is accelerating and choosing to do as well as do more, I think is really important. As economists, we talk about this idea of allocative efficiency. Are we spending the money on the things we value most highly, as well as are we being efficient in producing the things that we value? And I think this is a real opportunity through technology to address that equitable allocation of resources challenge that we've had for a long time.
Yeah, great point. But as you said, we're running low on time, so I just want to thank you for that presentation. I think it was a great cap to this entire session. And just speaking generally, and I want to thank all the attendees for joining us today to talk about, just how we can use technology to develop these digital tools, specifically bridging academia with industry to provide these tools to, again, on Chris's point, maybe provide more equity to the general population, specifically maybe populations that were underserved, populations that could use these types of distributions that don't need, a state-of-the-art MRI machine somewhere that is not close to them or things of that nature. So I hope you enjoyed the talk today. We are thankful for our sponsors for making this happen. And with that, I'll throw it back to Brian Goldman, who will take it back to the rest of the KBHN virtual conference today.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Kamaldeep. for your excellent moderating, keeping the conversation flowing. I also want to thank participants Chris McCabe, Sarah McCown, Penny Corkum, Jim Fitt, Robin Woods, Ryan Darcy, John Sheehan, and Elizabeth Keys for a really fascinating conversation. That ends the morning's live stream. It's now time for everyone to head over to KBHN's networking space for our daily dose of networking with Ask the Expert. There are 5 Ask the Expert panels. I'm on one of them. You can also attend the exhibition and networking sessions. These are moderated by KBHN Research and Training Manager Doug Swanson. Feel free to interact with all of the experts, conference delegates, exhibitors, and of course our amazing sponsors on the KBHN networking platform. The link to drop into the virtual networking space is there, that away. See you all back here at 2:50 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 11:50 a.m. Pacific Time to kick off our, I guess, late morning and afternoon sessions, depending on where you live. Have fun. See you later.